Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Fantastic Four number 235, cover dated October 1981, and this is part two of a two-part storyline that began at the end of the previous issue. So we see the Fantastic Four here in space on the receiving end of optic blasts from Ego, the living planet. So it's a pretty cool cover by John Byrne, inked by Terry Austin. Another few details regarding this cover that I would like to pick out for you is that this is the first corner box where the characters are rendered by John Byrne. So it's John Byrne's versions of the Fantastic Four. Interesting to give the Human Torch a full figure in that corner box. Also, I really like the Spider-Man down here in the bottom left-hand corner box. One other little detail, this is a UK comic, so it's 20p there, and the month isn't included in the corner box. Well, it's the FF battling the living planet Ego. Let's open this one up to the splash page, and that is a very cool splash page. The story itself in this issue, it's very plot-driven. There is only kind of like typical characterization of the various members of the Fantastic Four, but the artwork in this is really the standout aspect of this particular issue. So the title of the story is Four Against Ego, and the creative team is John Byrne, words and pictures, Gene Simek, letters, and Bob Sharon on colors. So the story opens in medias res. John Byrne kind of favors this trope where you pick an exciting moment and you start there, you start the story there, and then you go back in terms of what led up to the Thing carrying that huge hunk of equipment. Where is he? The gentleman's name is Ben Grimm, and as the Thing, he's one of the he is one quarter of the far fabled Fantastic Four. He's seen many a strange sight, but none so strange as this. And where he is he's in this organic area. Underfoot, there's goop, all gooey and sticky. It's like walking in earwax, he says, and it's so blasted hot. I almost forgot what it's like to be cool. Anybody'd think I was walking in a fireplace. Whoever heard of a fireplace in the ear? So he says to himself, you're starting to go bananas. Got to hold this sucker all the way down to the core. If I fail, I let down the whole friggin' earth. He thinks to himself, and I'm the only one who can do it now. The others are gone. There's only me left. So are they dead or are they not dead? Like, this is a little mystery at the opening of the story. But it's so hot and the pressure. If I didn't have rocks instead of skin, I'd be pancaked for sure by now. It's no good. I gotta rest just for a minute before I collapse. And as he pauses, the Thing's mind, flashing without order across countless jumbled thoughts, turns back. So his thought turns back to the middle of the previous issue and the storyline in New York and the gravity waves that destroyed a lot of the city. The Fantastic Four getting into their spacecraft rocket to investigate the origin of the gravitational waves which were coming from space. So we're getting all of that retold. But what I want to comment on before moving on is a point I've made before, that John Byrne really does an excellent version of the Thing, looking really, really good in these panels. And I like the way that he's varying the shots in the panels. We've got a distant shot of Ben hauling that hunk of equipment, close up on his foot, close up on his face, a medium shot, and then a close up on the side profile on his face as he's gritting his teeth there, trying to lug that hunk of equipment to the core. So let's continue with the story. Yeah, this is nice. So we have them catching up to the end of the previous issue, where in their space shuttle they find themselves confronting Ego, the living planet, and he says, creatures of the third planet, heed me. Across the boundless reaches of the cosmos, I've sought he who is my enemy. So who is that? That's not revealed until later in the issue. His spore is the remnants of dead, crushed worlds, and it has led me to this stellar system. But any long-time reader of Marvel Comics would be conjecturing that maybe he means Galactus. How I mean to destroy your world. Now I mean to destroy your world and all its teeming populace. I am the living planet. I am Ego. So the Fantastic Four are going to have to thwart Ego's plan to destroy the Earth. And he says they're an I am death, and he blasts them with those optic blasts. So Their shuttle crash lands on the surface of Ego, and we get to see like Byrne's design for the weird surface structure of this living planet. So he's definitely drawing on influence from Kirby and also Ditko for this weird surface. So they touch down, they regain control of the spacecraft, and the Human Torch goes outside and starts blasting the surface of Ego and creates a landing strip for them to set down on. Look at the place. The Human Torch thinks to himself, it's like something out of Broomhilda. The scenery keeps shifting and changing. So they exit their spacecraft. That's a really nice panel. I like that. I like the body language there of Reed helping Sue from the shuttle. And the thing says here, there's a horrible stench, and the thing says, never mind the smell, check the view. What the heck is that? So this is pretty cool and interesting, and it looks a little bit like Kirby tech as well. Great Scott, a sidereal propulsion unit, says Reed. That must be how Ego moves freely through space, but it's beyond the horizon. It must be hundreds of miles tall, reaching outside Ego's atmosphere. That's pretty cool, that detail. Gives you a sense of the scale and the grandeur of the scale of Ego, the living planet. And there's something familiar about the technology, says Reed. Yeah, it's Kirby tech, but is it also Galactus tech as well? So Reed says here that we must examine that engine. If we can find a way to deactivate it, we can at least delay Ego's assault on Earth. So Reed instructs Ben to pull the portable sky cycles from the locker on the spaceship, and now they're aboard them there. That's a very nice, that's a cool panel. And I like the way that Byrne has inked in these energy clouds as well. So he's kind of cut through the black ink with white ink or paint, it seems. Yeah, it's an interesting technique. And so now they're going towards this manifestation of Ego's massive head. And he says, you're approaching the propulsion unit, my enemy attached to me. With it, he sought to banish me to the great dark of interstellar space. But he did not consider the power of my intellect. I learned to control the engine. I made it serve my will. It is now mine, and you shall not reach it. So the optic blast there again. That's an interesting effect where we just get to see them in a kind of hatched silhouette in the midst of that blast. So they're knocked off their cycles to the ground, but of course Human Torch helps them alight on the ground safely, and the thing with his bulk and his skin is okay to land as he does. And so he says here as he gets up in the midst of all of that organic material, well, thanks just all to pieces, Reed. You can pick up the tab for spring cleaning my dainty orange bod. And what do you think Ego's going to do about this hole I made in his hide? Before the leader of the FF can respond, however, there is these part of Ego's biodefenses start attacking the thing there. In a word, they're antibodies. So this is an interesting layout here on this page. The 4-panel grid, that's a Kirby layout from his time on the Fantastic Four. So Byrne deliberately aping or imitating that, I would say. And it's pretty cool for rendering action scenes, and that's what we get here with these antibody creatures being hurled away by the thing, and then Sue using her force field in order to evade them. But she says aloud here, Ego can feel me, but that just means I'll have to change my tactics. And Reed here says, good work, Sue, you've caused them to herd together. Now I need only surround them with my pliable body. What next? And fling them into space. So now Reed's plan is that they got to act quickly. We have a moment before Ego can summon more antibodies. Before he does, we must reach the rocket unit. So that's their destination. So they get up onto the unit, and Reed basically tells Johnny to throw a fire barrier around them. So he does that with his flames, and then these antibodies just walk right into the flames, and Johnny's aghast. He's thinking that they're committing suicide, but Reed explains, no, Johnny, the antibodies have no life of their own. They're just cells of Ego's body. You destroy more living things each time you get a haircut. And I was right about this engine. I have seen this technology before. That gives me an idea. But we're not going to get insight into what his idea is. We're going to have to wait and see how things turn out. And there's a cutaway. There is a scene switch to Manhattan and the apartment of Frankie Ray, who is the on and off again girlfriend of Johnny Storm. And she comes out, she hears something in the apartment, and she thinks to herself, well, she catches a glimpse of herself in the mirror, and her thoughts trail off to nothing. Her heart pounds against her ribs, her brain reels, for suddenly Frankie Ray knows, she knows something about herself, but what is it? That's a little mystery that Byrne is seeding, and has been seeding since his first issue on the title as writer-artist back in 232, a few months earlier. So that's something that's going to get developed, that subplot, in future issues. So here we're back on Ego, and Reed is instructing Ben to take out this particular piece of equipment, and they're interrupted by a manifestation of Ego. He says, I am Ego, all that is this world is the stuff of my body, all is mine to command. You've defied me, now feel my wrath. It's a very Silver Age style dialogue. So Sue uses her force field to protect them from osseous material. So they're not rocks, they're bone. They're made of bone. And then they get off the platform and jump into one of the pores of the living planet. And the hole's bigger than the Grand Canyon, though, because of the scale of Ego. It's not a hole, Ben, it's a pore. I spotted it earlier. Our speed of descent should make it difficult for Ego to attack, says Reed. And Human Torch goes to scout ahead. It's a nicely drawn page. And now we're inside the living planet. So they're making their way down these organic tunnels. And Reed is theorizing all the way. He's saying an organism as complex as Ego must have a centralized neural control system, a brain. If we can detonate that power pack, so that's what this piece of equipment is, in the brain, we should be able to stun Ego. As if on cue, Human Torch says, you're never going to believe what I found, and it looks like it's the brain of Ego. But Reed isn't so sure. He says, I suspect this is a pseudo-brain created by Ego to mislead us. Johnny blasted. So that's a clever little bit of storytelling and thinking out there by Byrne. And so Human Torch blasts the brain, and the result is there is screaming from Ego, but it's not pain, rather it's anger, because he's angry, as Reed says, that we've discovered his sham. So now they decide to go onwards to try to get to the true brain, and as they make their way deeper and deeper into the core of Ego, the pressure and heat builds, so that Reed flags and he has to give up on going any farther. So Sue and the Thing and the Human Torch go onwards, but Sue ultimately weakens too from the heat and the pressure. So Thing throws her up to a less hot and less pressured area, and then he continues on with the Human Torch. But then the Human Torch too can't maintain the journey. So basically the Thing tells him, you go back, because if your flame dies, you'll cook. So off goes the Human Torch. So now we're back at the splash page. Here we are back at the splash page, and we know that the Fantastic Four, they're gone, but they're not dead. And so Ben is continuing by himself on this solo mission to get the power pack to the true brain. And Byrne's third-person narration here is interesting. Among pilots, the hot pilots, the test pilots, who daily risk their lives for little more than the sheer joy of flying, there is an unspoken credo. Those who make it, those who survive and live and fly and survive again, those special few who make it, do so not because of courage or guts or bravery. Those words are not part of the hot pilot's vocabulary. No, they make it because they're the chosen few, the elite. They have what Tom Wolfe called the right stuff. Today, 200 miles below the skin of a living world, Ben Grimm proves once again what his pilot buddies always knew. Ben Grimm has the right stuff. I think that that's the high point of this issue. You know, the characterization otherwise is just general for these characters. It's typical, their typical voices and attitudes and opinions. But I really like this focus on the Thing and this narration that's kind of focuses in on who he was before the cosmic rays transformed him into the Thing. He is a test pilot, a hot pilot with the right stuff. But even that cannot prepare him for the sight he finds around the next corner. Heat and pressure are forgotten. Ben feels a sudden chill, a sudden lightheadedness. This is it, the true brain of the living planet. So we get another one-page panel here for that revelation. Again, I just really like Byrne's rendering of the Thing. It is as good as Kirby's, and and it's because he is, in his drawing of the Thing, not afraid to embrace the cartoony aspect of the Thing's visual design, but he makes it fit in with the otherwise more naturalistic style he uses for the other Fantastic Four characters. But it works really well, and I like the spotting of blacks here on the side of the Thing's face and body as well. And a technique that Byrne seems to be using here is that he's, like I pointed out earlier, he's cutting in white lines through the black ink to give this sense of a type of gaseous atmosphere around the true brain. So the Thing thinks here, holy cow, that thing must be big as the moon. Does Reed really think this firecracker is going to make any? He was about to think to himself any difference, but then he says to himself, hey, what's happening to me? So what is it that is happening to him? Well, because of his proximity to Ego's actual true brain, he's overwhelmed by Ego's thoughts, and Ben Grimm has neither the wit nor the way to close his mind against them. He sees, he feels, he knows the great emptiness of the early universe. The radiant energy of the Big Bang still crackles through the universe, and here in one small corner of creation, a clot of star stuff begins to congeal into a planetary mass. But this whirlpool of gas and dust is somehow different, unique in all the boundless universe. It seems somehow to sense its surroundings. Slowly it gathers cosmic debris to itself. It grows. It is a thinking, feeling, acting self, conscious of itself, aware of its distinction from objects of thought and perception. It is Ego. So that's interesting. Here we get this origin story for Ego, and also his antagonist, Galactus. And like all living things, it has a natural enemy. He who is more than a man, yet less than a god, he who is a Galactus. Twice does the living planet battle the devourer of worlds. First time with the aid, so this is Marvel continuity, with the aid of the thunder god Thor, Ego repulses Galactus, and reshaping his surface to suit their needs, invites the star-spanning race of wanderers to settle on him. It's a cruel joke. Thor is not long departed when Ego consumes the wanderers. Their separate identities vanish into Ego's own. The second time, Thor stands with Galactus, and together they vanquish the mad planet. Attaching a powerful thruster, they banish Ego to unending cold and dark, the unending cold and dark of intergalactic space. So those are the thrusters there, and that's what Reed Richards recognized as Galactus's technology. Now, one thing to note here, the layout of this page, the 9-panel grid, that's a Steve Ditko layout. So Byrne mixing here the Kirby layout of the 4-panel grid and also one page of the 9-panel grid here. He used 9-panel grids in the previous issue, which was more inspired by Ditko. So interesting stuff here, and then we're back to the story itself. Ben throws the power pack, but he misses his target, and on the surface, insolent microbes. You've sought to harm the great Ego. Now shall you feel my might? Now shall I crush your world to dust? Enraged, Ego triggers the giant engine embedded in the South Pole. Slowly he surges forward, drawing nearer, ever nearer the unsuspecting Earth. But with one of its power packs removed, only half the engine actually fires, and we see that there in the art. And what's the consequence of that? In a great slow arc, Ego curves away from Earth, and in that moment, Ego's defeated. The irresistible embrace of solar gravity seizes the rogue planet. Desperately, Ego fights to pull away, but his substance is weak and corrupted, he crumbles. And deep within, well, the thing's in trouble. So as Ego discorporates, Ben is thrust out into outer space, and that could be the end for him. I really like this panel here of Ego swinging and arcing around towards the sun, and a technique that Byrne is using here for the stars is an ink splatter. That's interesting. It looks good. And the noodling here on Ego as he's discorporating in the inking is interesting. And there's that white paint cut into the inks again. Yeah, good inking techniques from Byrne. And we've raced to the final page. So, you know, the actual climax and denouement of the story is rather rapid. It happens in the course of 2 pages. So maybe a criticism I would have is about pacing. So Ben, anyway, he's floating in space there, but the Fantastic Four rocket swings around and Reed grabs him using his elasticity powers. Quickly, the unconscious thing is reeled in, and, you know, presumably some amount of time later, he comes to, and basically he sees the result of what's happened, that all that's left of Ego is that gook, as he says. And Reed says, yes, Ben, and in a few weeks it will fall into the sun and be consumed. So this is an interesting device for the final panel. We just have their heads and they're talking here. So the thing says, well, we've had bad guys fall apart on us before, but I guess this is one for Guinness. Spelled wrong, should be a double N. Spares the bad puns, Ben, says the Human Torch. You ain't heard the whole of it. So Sue says, Ego carried us well within the orbit of Mercury. It'll take days to get home. And Reed concludes, so I suggest we get started. So as I said, like a really kind of fast finish to the issue. Dispatch of Ego. Could he really be so easily dispatched? Won't he be back? Of course he will. But yeah, that's the conclusion of a more or less 2-part story. And coming up next, the 20th anniversary special, as the fabulous FF go on their strangest adventure ever. And this is regarded as a classic of Byrne's run, the first classic in his run, Terror in a Tiny Town. So the letters page here haven't reached Byrne's 232. So they're talking here about Fantastic Four 228, and 228 in the letters is the most recent one they're referring to. And yeah, there you go. I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Fantastic Four 235. Let me know your thoughts on the story itself in the comments to the video. And if you enjoyed my review and commentary, please like the video on YouTube. It's very helpful for the channel. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.